I'm still trying to process how my brother, Ethan, ended up losing a family heirloom, a beautiful lakeside cottage that's been in our family for generations, all because he thought he could secretly sabotage my career. And how that very lakeside cottage is now mine. It sounds wild, doesn't it? Like something out of a twisted movie. But that's my life right now. And it all began with an email. Or, rather, an email I didn't receive. Let me rewind a little, because to understand any of this, you need to understand Ethan and me. I'm Olivia, I'm 29. Ethan is 32. We were never super close as kids. Not enemies, but more like two strangers sharing a house. He was always competitive, especially with me. If I got an A, he needed an A+ and made sure everyone knew it. If I joined a club, he'd suddenly be interested, then somehow end up running it. It was exhausting. I just learned to keep my head down. Our parents, bless them, were loving, supportive people, but I think they were a little blind to just how Ethan operated. They pushed us both to succeed, to reach for more than they had. College was non-negotiable, and they sacrificed a lot to make it happen. I went all the way to Portland for architecture school. It was a huge leap for me, first time living so far from home, dealing with imposter syndrome, figuring out a new city. But I absolutely loved it. Ethan stayed closer, got his MBA, and went into finance. He married his college sweetheart, Chloe, and on paper, they were the golden couple, high-paying jobs, a beautiful house in Raleigh, a cute baby, the perfect Instagram feed. I genuinely was happy for them, but it was hard not to feel like I was constantly falling behind while they lived this picture-perfect life. Things were going okay for me until last year. I was working for a mid-sized architecture firm in Portland, loving my tiny but cute apartment, finally finding my adult rhythm. Paying off loans, saving a bit, hiking on weekends, casually dating. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Then, out of nowhere, the firm announced massive layoffs. They'd lost a few big projects, and 30% of the staff was cut. Despite solid performance reviews, I was one of them. It hit me like a ton of bricks. No warning, no time to prepare. One day I had a career, the next I was unemployed. The job market was brutal. Seattle was already saturated, and Portland wasn't much better. I spent weeks applying to everything, even jobs I was wildly unqualified or overqualified for. Nothing. My savings drained fast. I couldn't afford rent. I crashed on a friend's couch, trying to stay optimistic, but it was rough. I was applying for barista jobs, retail, babysitting, anything. Still nothing. It was truly one of the lowest points of my life. Eventually, I had no choice but to call my parents. That phone call was so hard. I felt like such a failure. But they were incredible. They told me to come home, that I could stay as long as I needed. So, I packed up what little I had, sold a few things for a plane ticket, and moved back to Raleigh. Not exactly the triumphant return I'd imagined. And then, almost like the universe was throwing me a bone, something amazing happened. Literally the day after I got home, an email landed in my inbox from a very prestigious architectural firm right there in Raleigh. They wanted to interview me for a position I'd applied to weeks ago and completely forgotten about. I was floored. This wasn't just a good job, it was better than my old one. More money, more growth potential, and a company name that would open so many doors. I was thrilled. I threw myself into preparing. Hours researching the company, polishing my portfolio, doing mock interviews. My parents even insisted on giving me money for a new outfit, which I desperately needed. I felt hopeful for the first time in forever. The interview went incredibly well. The hiring manager was warm, friendly, and we had this natural conversation. She seemed genuinely impressed and said I'd hear back within a week. I left that interview on cloud 9. I truly thought things were finally turning around. But then, nothing. A week passed, then another. No email, no call. I sent a polite follow-up. No response. After 3 weeks, I had to face it, they'd moved on. Maybe they found someone better, maybe an internal hire. All I knew was the one bit of hope I had left had fizzled out, and I was back to square one. I was crushed. I went back to job hunting, but my heart wasn't in it. I was spiraling, feeling useless, unwanted, like maybe I'd made a huge mistake trying to pursue this career. My parents were supportive, but I could tell they were starting to worry too. And then, it happened. The revelation. I was using the family computer to apply for jobs when Ethan and Chloe came over for Sunday dinner. Ethan asked to use the computer to show everyone baby pictures. I logged out of my accounts and let him. After dinner, I noticed he'd left his email open. I was about to close it when a subject line caught my eye, handling Olivia's job situation. I know I shouldn't have read it, but something compelled me to click. It was an email exchange between Ethan and Chloe from about a month earlier. As I read, my blood ran cold. Ethan was describing how he'd figured out my email password. Apparently, I'd used it on their Wi-Fi during a previous visit, and he'd somehow saved it and been monitoring my emails. He'd seen the actual job offer from the firm I'd interviewed with, an offer, not just an interview, for a position with an even higher salary than I expected. And he deleted it. He intercepted and deleted my job offer, then deleted the follow-up emails from the company wondering why I hadn't responded. His reasoning? According to the email, Chloe was struggling with severe postpartum depression and had become fixated on comparing her life achievements to mine. Ethan wrote that he needed to protect Chloe's mental health, and that my temporary setback was nothing compared to what she was going through. I felt physically sick reading it. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely scroll through the rest of the exchange where they congratulated themselves on handling the situation and agreed not to tell anyone because people wouldn't understand. I printed the emails. And I just sat at the kitchen table in shock until my parents came home from their evening walk. I wordlessly handed them the printouts and watched their expressions change from confusion to horror to absolute rage. My dad's face turned a shade of red I'd never seen. My mom started crying. They immediately called Ethan and told him to come over, without Chloe. When he arrived and saw the printouts on the table, he first tried to deny it, then shifted to defending his actions. He claimed I was taking things out of context, that Chloe's mental health was at stake, that it was just one job and I could find another. He even had the audacity to suggest that I should understand because I had dealt with depression myself. The argument that followed was apocalyptic. My dad, who rarely raises his voice, was shouting. My mom, usually the peacemaker, refused to let Ethan deflect. I mostly sat in stunned silence, occasionally just whispering, "How could you betray me like this, when I was at my lowest?" Ethan eventually stormed out, saying we were all overreacting. The next morning, my dad helped me reach out to the architectural firm. We explained there had been a family situation that resulted in me not receiving their offer. Surprisingly, they were understanding, but unfortunately, they had already hired someone else. However, they said they were impressed and would keep my information on file. My parents were beyond supportive. They assured me I could stay as long as I needed, and my dad even reached out to some business contacts for me. But the damage to my relationship with Ethan felt irreparable. For the next 2 weeks, Ethan tried to call and text, but I just couldn't bring myself to talk to him. Chloe sent a lengthy email apologizing, claiming she'd been in a dark place with her PPD, but acknowledging what they did was wrong. I didn't respond to her either. Then came the twist that solidified everything. My parents own a second property, that beautiful lakeside cottage about an hour from Raleigh. It was my grandparents' home, and when they passed, they left it to my parents. Ethan and Chloe had always talked about how much they loved it, how they wanted to raise their kids spending summers there, just like we had. They'd been dropping hints for years about wanting to buy it eventually. Last week, my parents made a decision. They revised their will and estate plans. They explicitly stated that the lakeside cottage would pass to me, alone, when they died. Moreover, they decided to sign the property over to me now as an early inheritance, with the understanding that they can continue to use it whenever they want. When they told Ethan about this, he absolutely lost it. He called it unfair, accused them of playing favorites, and said they were punishing his entire family, including his innocent baby, for one mistake. My parents stood firm. They told him what he did wasn't a mistake, but a deliberate act of sabotage against his own sister when I was vulnerable. They said they couldn't trust him with their legacy. Now, Ethan is telling anyone who will listen that I manipulated our parents, that I'm exaggerating the job offer incident, and that I'm trying to drive a wedge between him and our parents because I'm jealous of his perfect life. Some extended family members are taking his side, saying that while what he did was wrong, permanently changing the inheritance is too harsh. I didn't ask my parents to give me the lake house. In fact, I was surprised. But I can't deny that it gives me some financial security knowing I have an asset in my name during this incredibly difficult time. And I'm not going to pretend I'm not still hurt and angry about what Ethan did. His actions could have left me homeless if not for our parents' help. The day after I first talked about this, I agreed to meet Ethan at a public cafe. It didn't go well. He brought printed materials about postpartum depression, as if educating me on it would somehow justify what he did. He kept emphasizing how Chloe wasn't herself and he was just trying to protect his family. When I pointed out that I was also his family and I was in crisis, he actually said, "Yeah, but you've always been good at bouncing back. Chloe is more fragile." I was speechless. Apparently, my history of managing depression and anxiety somehow made it okay to kick me when I was down. I asked him point blank if he understood how his actions could have left me homeless. His response? That I always had options and could have moved in with friends or found a temporary job. It became clear he saw my career as a hobby, while his and Chloe's careers were somehow more legitimate. We left things unresolved. He still wanted me to advocate for him with our parents regarding the lake house. I told him I wouldn't do that. I said the lake house decision was theirs, not mine, and he needed to address the root cause of their decision, his betrayal, rather than focusing on the consequence. After our meeting, I spoke with my parents and learned something new. Apparently, Ethan had been pestering them for years to either sell him the lakeside cottage at a below-market price or explicitly promise it to him in their will. They'd always deflected. His recent behavior was the final straw. They realized they couldn't trust him to respect their wishes or treat family property with the values they hold. My mom also shared that they were worried about Ethan and Chloe's financial situation. Despite their appearance of success, they apparently had significant debt. My parents feared that if they left the lake house to Ethan, he might sell it immediately to pay off debts, rather than preserving it as the family gathering place they intended. On a brighter note, the architectural firm that had originally offered me the position reached out again. They had a new project starting and thought of me for the team. I had an interview, and I'm trying not to get my hopes up too much, but it feels like things might be turning around. I also started seeing a therapist to process everything. It's helping me work through not just Ethan's betrayal, but my feelings about my career setbacks and the stress of the past few months. It's early days, but I already feel a bit more centered. Regarding the lakeside cottage, I've decided to accept my parents' gift, but with a modification. I proposed to them that I want to legally establish it as a family property that everyone can use. My parents are fine with this, as long as I retain ownership and final say over major decisions. I'm meeting with a lawyer next week to structure this properly. Some extended family are still giving me the cold shoulder, particularly Ethan's in-laws, who only have his side of the story. But I've decided not to engage. The truth will come out eventually, and I need to focus on rebuilding my life. But things escalated even further. The day after I last shared, I got a certified letter from a lawyer representing Ethan and Chloe. They were threatening to sue me for defamation and intentional infliction of emotional distress, claiming I'd been spreading malicious lies and that it was causing Chloe's postpartum depression to worsen. The letter also demanded I return the lakeside cottage to our parents so fair inheritance planning could take place, implying I had manipulated my parents while they were in an emotional state, essentially questioning their mental competence. I was floored. I showed the letter to my parents, who were absolutely livid. My dad immediately called his longtime friend, an excellent attorney. After reviewing the letter, the attorney assured us their claims had no legal merit. I hadn't defamed anyone, I simply shared actual emails Ethan wrote. The lakeside cottage was never Ethan's to claim, so there was nothing to return. And suggesting my fully competent parents were somehow manipulated was both offensive and unfounded. My dad's attorney friend sent a strongly worded response to Ethan's lawyer, pointing out the weaknesses in their claims and highlighting how Ethan's unauthorized access to my email may constitute a federal crime. He advised that pursuing legal action would only expose Ethan to potential criminal charges and suggested they reconsider. Meanwhile, I had that interview with the architectural firm. It went incredibly well. They offered me the position on the spot with an even better compensation package than the original offer. I started this week, and I'm thrilled to have my career back on track. The most dramatic development came yesterday. My parents decided to call a family meeting with our closest relatives, my dad's brother and sister, my mom's sister, and their spouses, people who have known us our whole lives. With my permission, they shared the printed emails and explained exactly what happened. The reaction was unanimous shock and disappointment in Ethan. My Aunt Carolyn, who had initially been somewhat sympathetic to Ethan, was in tears reading the emails. She said she couldn't believe her nephew could be so calculating and cruel, especially to his sister who was struggling. During this meeting, my Uncle Robert revealed something that made everything click. Apparently, Ethan had been telling family members that I had a drug problem and that my job loss in Portland was due to addiction issues, not company layoffs. He had painted a picture of me as an unstable addict who was manipulating our parents in a time of vulnerability. This is why some family members had been suspicious of me and supportive of Ethan, despite the clear evidence against him. I was absolutely stunned. I have never had substance abuse issues. Yes, I've struggled with anxiety and depression, but I've always been open about that and sought proper treatment. To have my brother fabricate this kind of lie about me was beyond comprehension. My parents immediately called Ethan and put him on speakerphone in front of everyone. When confronted with this lie, he first tried to deny it, then claimed he had concerns about my behavior that he might have overstated. When pressed for any evidence of these supposed drug problems, he finally admitted he had no proof, but insisted he was just worried about me. The family unanimously agreed that Ethan's behavior had crossed too many lines. His lies about me, his sabotage of my job offer, and now his legal threats, they destroyed any sympathy they might have had for his position regarding the lakeside cottage. After the call, my Aunt Carolyn hugged me and apologized for believing anything negative. She said she should have come directly to me instead of accepting Ethan's narrative. Other family members echoed this, and I feel like a huge weight has been lifted, knowing they understand the truth. Now, I'm still processing all this, trying to understand how my own brother could spread such harmful lies. I've decided to focus on the positive changes, my new job, the support of my parents and extended family, and the security of having the lakeside cottage in my name. Ethan hasn't responded since the family confrontation. His lawyer also hasn't followed up after receiving our attorney's response. I'm hoping this means they're backing down, but at this point, I wouldn't put anything past him. The situation with Ethan has taken a turn I never could have predicted. Just a few days ago, Chloe reached out to me directly, asking to meet privately. I was hesitant, but agreed to the same cafe where I'd met Ethan. When she arrived, I barely recognized her. She looked exhausted, had lost weight, and her usual perfect appearance was noticeably absent. She came alone, without the baby. What followed was one of the most honest conversations I've ever had. Chloe broke down almost immediately, admitting she's been living a lie. The perfect life they portrayed was a carefully constructed facade. They're deeply in debt from trying to maintain their lifestyle. Ethan's job isn't going well, he's actually on probation for poor performance. And her executive marketing position? That was actually a mid-level role she recently lost in a company restructuring. The postpartum depression was real, she's been struggling severely, but she revealed that Ethan had weaponized her condition, constantly comparing me to her in ways that made her feel inadequate. According to Chloe, Ethan would point out my career accomplishments, my independence, even my ability to bounce back from setbacks, making her feel like she wasn't measuring up. He told her I was their parents' favorite, that I'd always had things easier than him, and that I was a threat to their family happiness. When I got laid off and was struggling, she said Ethan seemed almost gleeful, constantly updating her on my downward spiral. When I moved back home and then got the job offer, he became obsessed with protecting their status as the successful ones. The email deletion scheme was his idea, but she admitted she didn't stop him, and even encouraged it, something she now deeply regrets. The most stunning revelation came when she explained why they've been so fixated on the lakeside cottage. Apparently, Ethan had already promised the property to several people as collateral for personal loans. He told creditors the house would be his inheritance and used this to secure significant borrowing. This is why he was so desperate when our parents changed their will. He's financially overextended based on an asset he never actually had. As for the legal threat, Chloe said she had no idea Ethan had done that until after the fact. She came to meet me against his wishes because she couldn't continue living with the deception. She's planning to take the baby and move in with her parents for a while to sort out her mental health and decide on next steps for their marriage. I didn't know how to process all this. Part of me felt vindicated that the truth was finally coming out, but another part felt genuine sadness for Chloe and their baby. I told her I appreciated her honesty and that I hoped she would get the help she needs. After our meeting, I shared everything with my parents. They were as shocked as I was about Ethan's financial deceptions. My dad decided to reach out to Ethan directly to confront him about using the lakeside cottage as unofficial collateral. The conversation apparently didn't go well. Ethan denied everything at first, then blamed Chloe for betraying family secrets when he realized she had spoken to me. Yesterday, things came to a head when Ethan showed up unannounced at my parents' house while I was at work. According to my mom, he was agitated and demanding to speak to all of us together. When my dad asked him point-blank about borrowing money against his expected inheritance, Ethan finally broke down and admitted everything. The truth is even worse than Chloe described. Ethan has gambling debts. His job performance issues stem from his gambling addiction, which he's kept hidden from everyone, including Chloe. He's been using the promise of eventually owning the lakeside cottage to secure loans from increasingly unsavory characters. Now that it's clear he won't get the property, he's in potential danger from these creditors. My parents, despite everything, are still parents. They're devastated, but immediately shifted into protection mode. They've convinced Ethan to enter a treatment program for his gambling addiction. And my dad is working with his attorney to figure out how to address the debt situation without putting anyone at risk. As for me, I started my new job this week. It feels surreal to be back in a professional environment after everything that's happened. My new colleagues are welcoming, the projects are exciting, and for the first time in months, I feel like I'm back on solid ground career-wise. It's been a whirlwind, an emotional roller coaster I never expected to be on. I'm trying to embrace this new chapter, but I still wonder, do you think there's any coming back from this kind of betrayal with a brother?